Mathematician, computer scientist, cryptanalyst, persecuted homosexual. The man we have to thank for our various computing devices carried all of these titles to his deathbed. Before computers had ever been imagined, he developed an idea for one. When the Nazis were sending seemingly unbreakable codes, he cracked them. And when the police were knocking on his door, he subjected himself to the laws designed to rid the world of homosexuality. The great scientist I speak of is Sir Alan Turing. But what does all this mean? Well, during the early 20th century, a mathematician came up with posed the question, really, of whether there was any mathematical process that could solve all mathematical problems. And so Alan Turing developed the Turing machine, or the first computer, as an idea of a machine that you could pass code through that represented mathematical equations. And he answered the question as saying no, there was no mathematical or mechanical process that could answer all mathematical problems. This was the correct answer, but he was beaten to the answer by Alonzo Church. But the news was so original and no one had ever heard of anything like this that it made headlines all over the world. Furthermore, during World War II, the Germans were sending codes with their Enigma machine. These codes were even traveling over British phone lines, and no one could understand why they were unbreakable. Eventually, Alan Turing was hired by the government and led a team to develop a machine that could break these codes and possibly saved hundreds of thousands of British lives. However, while he was very successful, he wasn't immortal. And during the early 20th century in Britain, homosexuality was considered much more than a sin. It was actually a crime. One day, after being robbed, he called the police, like any upstanding citizen would, and whenever they knocked on his door, he answered the door. They asked for anyone who possibly could have been a suspect, and he mentioned his boyfriend. At this, the police were astounded, and they took him into custody for being homosexual. While in prison, he eventually got out, but he was on parole and had to subject himself to injections of estrogen to correct himself for being homosexual. The estrogen eventually worked. He stopped having random relationships with men, and he also became very depressed. Being a fan of Snow White, it said that he laced an apple with cyanide, took a bite, and committed suicide on June 7th of 1954. Today we looked at the overwhelmingly tragic life of Alan Turing. He was an immensely influential person and is responsible for the amazing globalization that we experience in our world today. Unfortunately, he does not live in this time of computing due to the cruel world that wasted him away.